Hey everybody, it's Norm from Tested.
And it's Jeremy from Tested.
Welcome back to Projections, where this week we're going to be reviewing the HP Reverb Windows Mixed Reality headset. That's still a thing.
The Windows Mixed Reality?
Yeah.
Yes, it is. And it was a thing that was introduced a couple years ago. A lot of developers came out with Windows Mixed Reality headset. These are the first guys to make an iteration on that, to do a second pass at it.
And it really feels like a second generation.
In terms of the headset, yes it does.
Yeah, right, that's right. So the first generation of Windows Mixed Reality, WMR headsets, were really boilerplate, meaning that they shared a lot of similar characteristics with each other. They almost all had, aside from the Samsung Odyssey, a 1440 by 1440 panel. They all use the same inside-out tracking system that Microsoft developed. They almost all had the exact same controllers, which this one has as well. And since then, we've seen iterations. Samsung did Odyssey Plus. There have been announcements, but not yet releases of just a slightly different form factors. But HP has really gone and, at least on the display side, done their own thing here.
Yeah, no, they have upped the resolution per eye from 1440 to 2160.
By 2160.
Per eye.
Yeah.
This is a massive resolution bump over top of not just the Windows Mixed Reality headsets that came before it, but anybody else doing VR headsets currently.
Not even the first gen. We're talking about the headsets being released this year.
Yeah.
Over on the Oculus side, the Rift S, which we've reviewed, has a single panel LCD, 2560 by 1440. And then on the Valve side, with the Index coming out later this year, that has the same resolution, but with a different type of display as like the Vive Pro.
Or the Quest.
As the Quest, 1600 by 1440 as well, which, having used some of those, like the Quest and the Vive Pro, those are market improvements over first gen. We were really curious what it would be like to put on something with not only this high resolution, but that high resolution concentrated into the same field of view.
Right.
And
because we've seen the Pimax try to take a high resolution and spread it across your field of view, which is great for giving you peripheral VR, view, but you do spend pixels there, and the pixels, per inch decreases.
Yeah, and I guess the result, the bottom line, having used this in a variety of games and different experiences, and looking at text and cockpits, is that it is a huge improvement.
The resolution bump that this headset presents is its crowning achievement. That is why you would buy this headset. Every other aspect of this headset is inherited from first-gen Windows Mixed Reality. The inside-out tracking, 2 cameras, and it performs just as well as it ever did, but that also means it only performs just as well as it ever did.
Right.
The controllers, standard Windows Mixed Reality controllers, which are not our favorite controllers.
They're not good. I'm just going to go out and say it. They are not good. They track just fine, but the button placement, the responsiveness, the weight, everything about it, the way they map onto the software, was unhappy with this. And even playing the same exact games using the touch controller, the Vive controller, and this controller, this is by far the least pleasant to use.
Right, so we're in a strange position of wanting to rave about the resolution, but having to say that the headset truly is hampered by the things that it's inherited from version 1 to Windows Mixed Reality. Yeah. But to the good points.
Yes.
Like, we stepped into Rec Room, for instance, and suddenly, honestly, you step into any game that you're used to playing with a traditional VR headset, any other VR headset, and suddenly it feels like you've turned on 3D acceleration. It really made me feel like those early days when I first got like a 3D effects card in my computer.
Right, and you went from software, jaggies, to smooth lines.
And suddenly you're seeing all the assets as the designers designed them.
Or maybe even not the way they never intended those assets to be seen.
Certainly beyond what they were able to see in VR when they developed them. Yeah, I think that there's a certain aspect of that where these games that are out there are designed for current resolutions. And they can hide some imperfections behind low resolution, like games used to do all the time.
I think Rec Room is a great example because on its face, Rec Room isn't a game that you would think needs a high resolution display. We're talking about very flat shaded graphics, low poly graphics, very simple design. But even on a game like that, putting on the reverb, and I think you felt this as well.
Yeah.
Not only was all the detail sharper, but I felt like I could see further.
We tested that.
Yeah.
You absolutely could see farther. You, Kishore, and I all stood in a line and we tried to read a sign in the distance. And honestly, you could read it almost twice as far away as we could.
Right, and of course that varies depending on how big that text is,
Yeah.
but there's a simple test you can do if you have Rec Room. Like in the lobby, there's like a bulletin board with pictures of a social media, Instagram posts, right? And they have in text the type of the name of the person. And we, like you said, stood in a line and consistently it was further back, 1.5 to almost twice as further back where we can make out the legibility of that text. But even just geometry, playing a quest in a Rec Room, I felt like I could aim further. I could resolve enemies in the distance, landscape in the distance further, even though the game was rendering the same assets just at a higher resolution.
Right, and I think unlike those early days of playing Quake or Tomb Raider, like the assets actually are higher res, and you are truly revealing more to appreciate about all of those textures and geometry. I really liked that aspect of this headset. I felt more immersed. I felt like I was, it's hard to describe a higher level of immersion, but that is how I ended up feeling.
And I didn't feel like my eyes strained. In a game, cockpit game, Elite Dangerous, for example, where there is a lot of text. You can play it not in VR, you can play it in VR. In VR, with DK1 and DK2, big jump to the CV1 and the Vive, even bigger jump.
And I know a lot of people enjoy that game on those headsets, and the text is legible on those headsets. But with this, it became a non-issue.
It's comfortable.
Yeah.
It became being in that cockpit because it's a menu system where you glance at parts of the UI and things pop up. I didn't have to strain. I didn't have to stress my eyes. Things just felt readable. Same thing with something like Space Pirate Trainer. Enemies further off in distance, I felt like I could get them now.
Right.
Now, that's not to say that there's no screen door effect or that everything is perfect, right? Like, Michael Abrash has talked at his keynotes about his dream state would be like a 4K by 4K.
Which is not twice the pixels, 4 times the pixels that are in these displays.
And so that makes me wonder what that could even look like. But this is a point where the jaggies and the aliasing is so much of a non-issue. I'm ready to get used to this being a new standard, which isn't a standard, unfortunately.
This is the resolution that I think we all want, like going to the next generation of VR. It's what we kind of would love to see from the Index or from a new Rift. But you need the computer to push it. So we're both, I think you were running a 1080.
I am running a 1080.
Yeah, so was I. Straight 1080, not a TI, but still a pretty sweet graphics card. And in Steam, you have to bump up the render resolution to 175% in order to pump out the number of pixels that this can display. And that really bogs down even a 1080. So, I mean, we were playing Rec Room, but I was getting some frame rate drops here and there. On occasion, it would be a pretty dramatic frame rate drop.
And you would notice these various systems were trying to compensate.
Yeah.
Like all this time warp, space warp stuff that was trying to fill in and reproject, and that was definitely way more noticeable. Now, thankfully, this does work with Steam. In Steam, there is a very easy slider to have granular control over the render resolution. I'll tell you exactly what pixel by pixel it's trying to render at. And at 100%, which is the native resolution of the Vive, it was okay. It's like it feels like you get a little bit of dithering. I played it not. I wanted to stick to native resolution, so 174, 175%. You toned it down a little bit.
I dropped it to 150 in order to keep my frame rate maxed out.
Yep. And then I also tried the headset on a 1070, on a mobile 1070 laptop, which runs great on all the other headsets I use, and that I did have to tone down to about 125%.
Now, it is a single DisplayPort and USB 3 cable, just like the Rift S. And that plugs into the back. It is detachable. It's a proprietary plug in the back here, so don't lose that cable. But it's really super easy to put on and to set up in that way. I gotta say, Oculus now has the crown for ease of setup, even against Windows Mixed Reality, because you're still walking this around as you did with WMR version 1. You take the headset and you walk around your play space, and I always get weird geometry that way because it tells me to stand in the center first, etc. But the headset itself, very light. I think we clocked it around 500 grams. 510
grams, which technically heavier than the Rift at 470 grams, lighter than the Rift S, lighter than the Quest.
Still very, very manageable weight. And it has integrated over-the-ear headphones. And actually, a lot of people have commented that it looks a lot like a Rift.
It does. Ergonomically, it has the same type of stretchy attachment system with almost like rigid back hard, rigid plastic back. The baseball cap system is what
Right.
we kind of referred to that as. In the back, even though there is built-in audio, you can plug in third-party audio if you want. Of course, it has a microphone on the bottom, which for us we found
Oh, yeah.
was one of the better microphones. You know, jumping on Discord, jumping on Skype, it sounded really clear coming out of this headset.
Yeah, we didn't expect that, and then we were on Discord with Kishore, and both of us were like, "Wow, what are you using for
Yeah.
your headset, for your microphone?" This, I don't even know where's the microphone
right there.
hole. It looks very standard.
Yeah.
But they did a really good job with whatever that microphone is.
Right. There is a version of pass-through now for Windows Mixed Reality, and it's not a traditional pass-through you see with the Rift or even with the Vive. It's a flashlight system. It's where you point the controller, has a window that gets you a monochromatic view of the outside world. You can't use that for setup. It's just a comfort option in order to see your world.
It's a neat effect, and it's probably better than nothing. You know, any camera that has an inside-out ability needs to employ that just to keep people comfortable and able to maintain contact with the real world. Can we talk about the controllers?
I want to talk about one more thing, or two more things with the display also.
Yeah, well, sure.
Well, when we interviewed HP's product manager about this, they did admit that to get these panels, and a lot of VR headset makers are designing their headsets around the type of panels they find
Right.
and building a headset around that. They found that they love the pixel density of these 2K panels, 21 by 60 by 21 by 60, but they are actually smaller physical panels than what you'd find on a Rift or other headsets, which means that there's less stereo overlap. And that was something that was acknowledged to us, and we wondered, would that be an issue, right? Using this, having less stereo overlap between left and right eye. And also, there is no hardware IPD adjustment.
Right.
It was almost a non-factor for me.
I noticed it, but it didn't affect my enjoyment. It didn't affect the immersion level. It's the kind of thing that you forget about after a minute in the device.
Yeah.
And you might notice if you then switch back to another device like the Quest or the Rift or a Vive, you'll notice that the stereo overlap, and that is to say, like how much of this circle overlaps with this one. And it's fairly complete on those other devices. Whereas this one, they do appear to be spread a little bit further apart. Not a big deal.
Also, just the amount of sweet spot for the lenses, because the field of view is about the same as the old field of views. You know, it's you're looking through your snorkels again.
Yeah.
It's a low. I found it to be a relatively low sweet spot, where if I drift my eyes, my pupils away from the center, very quickly the sharpness would go away.
Yeah, I wonder how much of that is a factor of the high resolution resolving in the center of that display.
Which is what you want. That's where all the benefit is.
But that's true of every VR headset, right? Like you look through a Rift or a Vive or anything else, and you're going to see like the crisp, as crisp as it can be in the center.
Right.
But the lower resolution of those headsets is quite dramatically lower than this one. So it's going to be even sharper here. So I wonder if the mere fact that those other displays are lower resolution means that we don't notice the degradation of sweet spot beyond the center of those lenses, whereas you really see it here.
Yes, and of course there is no eye tracking, so if you're just used to not glancing, but used to moving your head around, which you would do on a thing like Elite Dangerous.
Could you imagine
the UI? I know.
This would benefit so much from foveated rendering. This is the ideal kind of headset for that.
Right.
Because
But again, foveated rendering only makes sense if you have a sweet spot that's big.
Well,
because if your sweet spot isn't big, that doesn't matter. You're going to not get as much clarity near the edges of the frame anyway.
I think that this headset would benefit from foveated rendering tremendously, just in as much as you wouldn't have to buy a 2080 graphics card or something incredibly powerful just to power it.
There's room for optimization in terms of just optimizing for that sweet spot in the rendering. It also does the thing we like in terms of it being easy to adjust and tilt up and down. So getting your head to that spot is really good. And then I also want to address the discussion that people have found online with the idea of Mira, which we haven't really talked about before in the show, but it's a quality of the display and the lenses where it can be best described as maybe like a dirty window pane effect. And it is something I noticed in this headset when I went for it. Most noticeably when you have bright lights. If you look at a white spot, you get this muddy lens look. Not enough that it would take away from the game, and once I'm focused on the content, I didn't really pick it up. But if you're just standing around and you point your eyes to a white light-colored spot in the experience, you will notice that it's not a nice, even image quality.
Is that a factor of the curvature of the lenses?
I think it's a panel. I think it's a
panel thing.
Yeah, and there's a lot of speculation about whether HP has acknowledged this or whether there's something that they're trying to fix.
Yeah.
People have already pointed out as of this week that some of the pre-orders for the Reverb were held back. We reached out to HP and they said that it was due to demand and it would be resuming this week. So that tells us that's not an acknowledgement, or that's not to resolve what people consider to be panel display issues. I think this is just the quality of that panel. This is the one they picked, and
there's
that's just
trade-offs
something-
for that resolution, and another trade-off is definitely black levels. Now,
Yeah.
now this is an LCD panel. It's not an OLED panel, so that's out of the gate. You know you're going to be dealing with black levels that are not pure black. However, the other guys who are also doing LCD, Oculus and on the new Rift S and the Index from Valve, those black levels are blacker than this.
At least in the Rift S, yeah.
I mean, because a lot of people were concerned about that. They asked us to step into Space Games when we were testing out the product and make sure that the black levels, were deep enough to create that immersion level. And personally, I think that they are on the Rift S. I have not tried the Index. You have. But with this, they are quite a bit brighter. And you can see that very clearly because the black, if you're playing Elite Dangerous, for instance, the black of space next to the matte of the headset that you're looking through is quite a bit brighter.
Yeah.
And so I would say not just the black levels, but the overall contrast of this headset, the brighter levels compared to the darker levels, is not that rich. I mean, it is really all about that resolution.
Right. I thought that very noticeably it wasn't as bright as I wanted a panel. Going from Rift S to this, Rift S looked brighter. Not only was that the black levels better on that, but that then adds to what you're talking about, it being a lower contrast here. And especially when you're talking about a field of view that isn't that big already, it accentuates the tunnel vision.
Right, because you have that black to compare it to.
Right. Yeah. All right, let's talk about the controllers. We just wish that these weren't the controllers they ship with.
No, I mean, it is possible to play Windows Mixed Reality games on a Windows Mixed Reality headset using Steam controllers.
Yes.
Now that's a thing, but I feel like that's not even fair to talk about because you would need a Steam VR headset to do that, don't you? Because the Steam VR controllers need to still be piped through the receiver that's in a Vive or an Index.
I mean, the only people for that are in the position of maybe pre-ordering an Index versus paying $600 for the HP Reverb, upgrading from the original Vive. They have their lighthouses set up, they have the Steam, they like the Vive controllers, the wands, whatever you want to call them, and it does require a little bit of hacking into it using some open input, VR input stuff. It works. You align the controllers, you kind of map your play spaces to be the same, and yes, it technically works.
That is a big workaround.
It is.
And expensive.
Yes, totally. And there is no way to pair this Windows Mixed Reality with the Oculus platform at all that we know as of yet. The thing that makes the more sense is potentially looking at this as a dedicated headset where you wouldn't be using traditional hand track controllers.
Well, let's talk about what's bad about these. So, for whatever reason, we couldn't even play one of the Rec Room Quests because when you go to throw something with these controllers, it's about 90 degrees off. Things go straight down. And I get it that there's a sense of momentum that they're trying to measure, and maybe it's on the Rec Room guys to, design around these controllers or include support for them. But they're supposed to have native compatibility with Rift and with Vive controllers, and the buttons and everything is mapped. Now, there's no A and B buttons or X and Y on this, so it maps the touchpad in sort of the same way that the Vive ones do. But there is an analog stick. Now, unfortunately, the button beneath the analog stick takes you into the Windows area.
There are two buttons. There's a Windows button, which is like the home button that opens the mixed reality interface, and then
which also oddly closes the app that you're using.
Oh, it did for you?
For me, twice I hit that button accidentally, and it just shut my game off.
You're right, because you're working layers and layers of apps, right? You have, on the base level, Windows Mixed Reality, which needs to launch and run and always be accessible to the controllers. On top of that, you're running Steam VR, which has its own menu system that you can access by hitting the center button.
You press the joystick in.
Yep, and then you have whatever menu for whatever game and experience you're in. So it's clunky.
It's definitely clunky. It just doesn't feel right. And after an hour of using this, my hands just felt cramped.
Yeah.
These are not ergonomically well designed. they're basically what you would design as a first iteration. This has so little in common with even the Xbox gamepad from the same company, which is like king of ergonomics in terms of like gamepads.
Yep.
This has nothing in common with the touch controllers, which we think of as like a really high bar right now. And the new index controllers look very interesting as well. This really feels like previous generation.
I mean, and that goes to the question of how well supported the whole Windows mixed reality platform is today. Microsoft put a big effort, seeded all these hardware manufacturers with specs, with controllers, with this boilerplate design for an ecosystem for VR, including building this front end. And then since then, they've really done nothing with it. They kind of refocused those efforts to HoloLens 2, whatever version of Windows runs on that, the light version of Windows. And I wouldn't be surprised if they give up on Windows Mixed Reality in terms of the VR side, but I really am holding out and hoping that maybe there's a team in there working on something, and maybe they trust their inside-out tracking, and maybe the second-gen controllers will be better and they'll be backward compatible. Right? That's not out of the realm of possibility, and that's something that you can't bank on paying $600 for a headset today. So it's just, unfortunately, that's the reality of it right now.
Right. So who is this headset for? Then it's for somebody who needs that resolution that we keep coming back to. I think it would be pretty great for gamers who have their own control set up for a specific kind of gaming. Driving games, for instance. A lot of people have their own, little cockpit that they can sit in and grab a wheel. If you're not using these and you want to use a HOTAS, for instance, for Elite Dangerous, you want those added pixels despite the black levels, this would be great for that.
I mean, I can't emphasize enough what a jump it is in the clarity.
Yeah.
When you have that resolution in the optimal setting. Really, like going from headset to headset, nothing has surprised me as much as a consumer product as this. And maybe want to build out a whole throttle and HOTAS system just to play Elite Dangerous, just to take advantage of this, because it really feels like a glimpse of where panels may be going.
Yeah. The only other headset that's approached this for me and surpassed it, to be honest with you, is the Vario headset, which is a commercial, business-to-business, enterprise-level device.
And that one, the pixel density was only to a very specific
Yeah, they had
spot.
like Vive Pro everywhere, but then in the center they use these 1080p displays that are really, really small, and they give you this sort of fixed foveated experience where the center is like reality. And it looks amazing. However, it's like thousands of dollars for this headset. It is not a consumer device. So under $1,000 at $600, like this resolution is a very sweet taste of the future.
Yeah, it is available for order now. They haven't, as of when we're filmed this, started shipping them, but according to HP, that will start again this week. So that's what we got for the HP Reverb. One more thing before we go.
Yep.
Both of us got to try a new VR experience this week. We unfortunately don't have footage of this because it's a VR escape room.
Right, so we don't want to spoil it for you, but we can tell you the general gist. It's developed by Ubisoft. It is set in the Assassin's Creed universe. They actually have two of these, one that's been around for a year and another one that they're just rolling out now. And it is, they've developed it for locations to put up themselves and charge an entry fee.
Yes, it is totally a licensing model, which is, I think, not going to be a new thing going on. Like, it's going to be a regular thing. We know companies like Survios and even the Arizona Sunshine folks have developed experiences because there's a whole business model of licensing content to VR gaming centers, to getting people into VR rooms. So we went to a local escape room facility down in Santa Clara off the couch that had 4 rooms set up for VR. People could pay to use VR.
Right.
And they had this 4-player or 2-player hour-long escape room in Assassin's Creed, which I thought was very, very interesting.
It was really well done in that, the best escape room experiences I've had have been ones that require cooperation.
Yes.
Like, you don't want to go in there and have everybody spread out and solve their own puzzles and come back. The ones that I really like are when everybody has to hold the button down at the same time or create a chain reaction where they're like holding hands across the room, make it conduct electricity. This was in that vein. Like, every single puzzle that the 2 escape rooms that I played presented required teamwork. Yeah. And I played with 1 other person, but I could see how the world was set up for 4.
Right. It would just mirror, they put you in almost teams of 2 and in parallel tracks, have to complete these goals. And one of the benefits of designing this, though people aren't actually in the same room, is that they can actually design rooms that are epic in scale.
Right.
So you are teleporting around. You're creating an avatar. For people who may be new to VR, it's only one button control. It's only trigger control. You're grabbing and teleporting with the same thing.
I didn't think about that. They use one button for everything.
There is a mode, they said, for more advanced users.
Okay.
The Game Master can allow you, if you want to use touch controllers and use a Rift setup, to grab and teleport differently.
And you mentioned the Game Master. That's an important aspect to escape rooms. There's
Right.
usually somebody who comes in the room with you and stays silent until they see that you need help.
And in this case, it was someone on a laptop in another room that would launch the game, make sure everyone was communicating properly.
Yeah.
There's no avatar in VR doing that.
No, but they can listen to everything that you say,
Yeah.
and they can type to you. So if you do hit a snag, you're always, you got some help.
Right. Mechanically, it's a lot of the same mechanics we've seen in other VR games. There's climbing, there's bow and arrow.
I kind of was surprised there was climbing, because that's an intense experience. If I put somebody I have put somebody into the climb, and they have noped right out of that, right as soon as they fall.
And maybe that's part of this, right? Giving new
Sure.
users a thrilling
Yeah.
VR experience. But what I loved was how they required the cooperation. The aha moments came when
Yeah.
you realize it wasn't just one person scaling a wall and climbing, it was combining that with another VR mechanic that another person had to do,
Right.
then to actually get you to progress through the level. And the scope was wonderful. You're climbing these giant caverns
Yeah.
and statues.
They pushed VR in the right spots to that end. I mean, they did things you could never afford to do in
Yeah.
a traditional escape room, and that's what you want from a VR experience. The thing that I wanted in addition to a VR experience were actual physical objects that I don't have at home.
Right.
Like the downside of this thing was that you were really just using an off-the-shelf Vive Pro.
You could imagine a scenario where if they didn't want to go through this enterprise solution of partnering with LBEs,
Yeah.
they could have just sold this and let people play at home and cooperate at home.
Right.
It would essentially be the same thing.
And then would I have paid $30 or $45 in order to play through it once with my friend who also paid that amount?
Yeah.
I don't think so. So I think maybe the price might be a bit too high, at least at Off the Couch.
Yeah.
I imagine Ubisoft lets the locations
They
set
do.
their own price.
Yeah.
But then again, most of their business is probably corporate team building exercises, and it makes a lot of sense for that.
For people who not everyone has VR.
And also for escape room junkies who just have gone to every local escape room, and the last ones are these VR experiences. I think if you approach it from like, okay, I'm going to an escape room, I understand that there was a lot of time and effort put into this specialized experience, and even though it's software, it also took a lot of development hours, then yes, you could sort of justify this cost.
I like the trajectory of what they're doing with this. The idea is that this studio, part of Ubisoft, is going to start spinning up new experiences every 10 months or so. And the first one, the Pyramid one, while it had climbing and other mechanics, the mechanics, they may introduce new mechanics, but the idea is that they want people to progress through, get more comfortable in VR, come back, and then challenge them with more challenging puzzles, right? Like more escape room type things. It's not necessarily about dexterity, but it is about communication, it is about cooperation, and that's where their aha moments came in.
The guy who runs this place Off the Couch, he actually has one of the records for visiting the most escape rooms in the world. Over 400, he said he's been to.
Wow.
And he had some great ideas himself that he was pitching to Ubisoft. Like, why not combine a traditional escape room with VR?
When you put it in at a certain point.
Maybe
in
you
the
get
headset?
to the room and there's a headset that does nothing.
Yeah.
You enable it and then you put the headset on, and the virtual reality aspects affect the real world and vice versa.
Or some asymmetrical
Yeah.
escape room where one person's in VR, another person's not in VR.
Like, that's something you can't do at home. And to me, that's the real value of escape rooms, is you're going to places to do things with friends, and you're having an experience like at a theme park that is impossible to have at home.
It goes back to the trade-offs, right? Either very highly specialized experiences or stuff that they can work with a lot of partners and make just the software and assume all their different VR escape rooms around the world that they have these set up in will have the same set of parameters.
That's the tricky part, right? Like, as much as I want rumble floor and a switch to pull on the wall, if they required that,
No one's gonna have it.
no one would have it.
Yeah. So that's available, I think, in 100 different places. We'll have links to the website below where you can see if there's one near you. It definitely is an interesting path for VR. And of course, we'll have more of those stories to tell in the future. Thanks for watching this time, and we'll see you next time. Bye.